The time being 10:08 a.m. on July 28th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the American Rescue Plan Committee. I am Chairman Jarrett Sanchez. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Bates. Brown. Martin.
Martin present.
Molina.
Molina present.
Strathman. Strathman here. Sanchez.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, we are not going to be approving the minutes from the last meeting. We have a little bit of a backlog on things, and so we will work on that for the next meeting. Maybe. Next, public comments. Is there anyone here who would like to give any comments on agenda items or non-agenda items? Sir, just please state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Michael Montgomery. I'm the Executive Director of Food for Greater Elgin. We're a food pantry on Commerce Drive in Elgin. So I live at 1201 Falcon Ridge Drive, also in Elgin. I'm here to remind you as you look at the ARPA funding to remember people who are poor. We served over 85,000 people last year with food, up from 39,000 just a few years prior. This is over 4,000 families, many of whom are now coming to us as their primary grocery store. They are seniors, they are people who are disabled, they are children, they are immigrants and refugees. They are either temporarily or on a long-term basis the working poor who have one or two or are past being able to work and don't have enough money to get food. They come to us for help. And we are going to need help in serving those expanded needs in the future. We thank you for your support and for the work that you do.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to? Bernie?
Way up. More than double.
Just state your name and address.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bernadette May from Family Service Association. We are at 1140 North McLean Boulevard in Elgin. I'm here to, applaud you, number one, for being willing to listen to the people of your communities who have spoken out and said what their needs are during this time. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to be at these meetings and give public comments. I also have been talking to many of you about the needs for mental health services throughout time. And as we have hit crisis proportions of where things are at, and we're finding our crisis systems in crisis, we are given a unique opportunity, I think, to be able to make a large impact on what the community is saying that they need. As we pointed out through the community health surveys that have been done through the Kane County Health Department and their partners, is that mental health has been determined as the #1 need by your constituents. And so if we can hear the voices of those constituents and make that deep impact at this point, I think there'd be many of us who would be happy to partner with you in that process. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, I don't see any requests coming from online, so we'll move on. Okay, discussion items. I beg your indulgence. I'm going to move up actually our new business portion ahead of the discussion items simply because we have Mr. Onzik. Is he? Oh, there he is. Mr. Onzik, he's been here for an hour plus already, and he has other work to do in his department. So we discussed him going first today to discuss the revenue recoupment options for fiscal year 21 through 23. And then we will have a resolution as well. So Mr. Onzik, would you like to lead the discussion?
Yes, thank you. I do have it's really the same presentation I prepared for you the last time. That's just about to come up on the screen, and I updated it. So I'm not going to re-present everything, just kind of quickly go through it since I've already presented it once before. This is the estimate of the lost revenue that we're seeking to be reimbursed for the year 2020. This is just basically showing you that it's a comparison of the 2019 base revenue of $180 million The government is allowing us to assume a 4.1% increase, which is adding an additional 7.4 million to it. So then that becomes the basis of comparison for the actual 2020 revenue, which is 180,811,000. And so the difference between those figures is the $7.4 million. And that's the amount that's mentioned in the resolution that you'll be considering a little bit later.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Let him finish
Okay.
first, please.
Okay, then projecting forward, this is just to give you a few different options projecting forward of what the lost revenue would be according to our current estimates, and this would be for this current year, FY22 and FY23. So just to give you a general explanation of how these figures were arrived at, earlier in the year, we asked for people to provide us with a 5-year projection of general fund revenues. And so the general fund revenue projections that were collected at that time were used in these calculations. We also obtained information from the Division of Transportation. They have their transportation improvement plan that goes out, I believe, a number of years. I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 years. So we use that information. And the rest, we just generally included like a 2% increase. So that was the basis of comparison. I'm sorry, that became our forecasted revenues for each of the years 21, 22, 23. And then against that, we compared what the government allowed us up to 4.1% increase. And that's where these 16.6 million, 17.2 million, and 22.1 million figures came from. We also then compared it against a 3% increase, and that's where these lower figures are coming from. And why we're picking 3% is that that's closer to what we've generally experienced over the past 3 years. So that's 14.6 million, 12.9 million, 15.4 million. And then this is just a 2% if you really want to be conservative. And a small amount is 12.7, 9 million, and 9.5 million. At the same time, then we estimated, and this has not changed, this is what we estimated to be the reimbursable expenses from the sheriff's area, according to his estimates at this point in time. So that's a total of 20.6 million. Public health, this is just what they're thinking that they'll have as eligible reimbursable expenses that are not expected to be reimbursed through grants, and that's a total of 522,000. So now if we put all this into these 3 tables, this table is using the lost revenue estimates as compared to the 4.1% limit that they allowed. And so this may be a little bit easier to track if you look at that second to the bottom line where it says to be determined. So after plugging in lost revenue, reimbursable expenses for public safety, for public health, and then what we've already allocated for mass vaccination, this is kind of giving you what's left to be allocated. So under this scenario, you've got a total of $17.1 million left to allocate. Under the scenario of using 3% as the revenue growth rate, you have $30.1 million left to allocate. And then using the 2% revenue growth rate, you have $41.8 million left to allocate. And then this is just some notes reminding you of what these lost revenue reimbursements can be used for. This was gone over by the state's attorney's office at a special meeting a few weeks ago. And then the last thing I just wanted to include here, just to make sure that you're aware of it, is we have some reports that are now being required for this, for the American Recovery, American Rescue Plan Act. And these are reports, of course, the finance department would be able to provide the financial data that goes along with it, but they're asking for more information than that. They're looking for program information, program reporting. So this would have to do with probably descriptions of the programs that you approve to be funded by these funds, the statistics that are associated with those programs. And then what efforts were made to improve the equity and engage the communities in these decisions. So that information needs to be compiled as part of the report. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I think somebody needs to be assigned to that responsibility so that that can be taking place along the way. So when these due dates come, like the first one will be August 31st, that information will have compiled and then be able to be reported. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Onzik on any of this information?
I have a question. So where does this
Bates,
Ms.
so we have
Bates,
your name on
Mavis
the record.
Bates, thank you. So why did the government come up with this 4.1% when the gross domestic product has grown approximately 2% over the last decade or so?
I'm sorry, I have no idea
minute,
why
okay.
they chose that.
I was trying to figure out what is our growth per year, annual growth, like our gross domestic product, if there were such a thing for Kane County over the last decade. Do you know what that percentage would be?
I don't know about gross domestic product, but within the context of what I prepared here, like let's see, I'll move it back. Oh, I must be going the wrong way. Oh, well, never mind. I don't want to waste time trying to navigate this. But the 3.0% estimate of recovery, lost revenue reimbursement, is closest to what our actual experience in terms of revenue growth has been. But this is across all funds for the county over the last 3 years, or like 2000, I think 17, 18, and 19.
17, 18, 19.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Bates, the 4.1% was a number they came up with as a national average. So there are units of government receiving money that will see a higher percentage in their previous 3 years. So they're allowed to use that higher number if they have it. Otherwise, 4.1 is the number everyone can safely use.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Martin.
This is more of a rhetorical question, I guess. If there isn't a person sitting in this room that doesn't know that we have budget constraints looking at us down the line here. And my rhetorical question is, why would we not maximize the amount of money that we can segregate from these funds to the benefit of the county and then adjust later on as circumstances mandate? But to me, we need to recognize that our premier obligation and fiduciary responsibility is to the constituents who elected us and who anticipate that we provide government services. So as I say, my question's not really a question. I just think if we have the opportunity, we should take advantage of it and we can adjust later on.
Madam Chair, I can see you thinking.
I would concur. Could we please see the slide that speaks on what government services, what we'd be spending the money on with government services? It was like the second to the last slide. And I'm going to read it out loud because it's not our money. I mean, it's not our money. It's their money sitting in the audience. It can include but are not limited to maintenance of infrastructure or for building new infrastructure, including roads, modernization of cybersecurity, including hardware, software, and protection of critical infrastructure, health services, environmental remediation, school or educational services, and the provision of police, fire, and other public safety services. That's the work of our county. And therefore, the money that we're talking about, whether 4.1 or 3%, whatever the decision is going to be going to that work of our county. It's all good work.
Mr. Shepro, did you have a question?
Yeah,
or
I
comment?
guess my understanding was that the 4.1 was a safe harbor. And if you could find another way to prove a higher number, you could. But like a lot of safe harbors, it's the only harbor really. Sad.
That's correct. If we were able to show, like by our actual experience over the last 3 years, that the growth was actually more than 4.1%, then we'd be allowed to use that higher percent. But in our case, it was only 3.2%.
You say your chart showed that it was actually less than the safe harbor. So
Yes.
take the money and run. Thank you.
Not take the money and run, take the money and invest it in the community.
Run to invest it in the community.
Mr. Chairman, may I have another rhetorical question?
Go ahead, Ms. B.
So I believe that I agree with everything that's been said. And I believe that it's very important for us to return these funds to the community as much as possible, not necessarily through the county, but through the organizations that are closer even to the communities than we are. So I see the intention of the American Rescue Act not being so much for infrastructure, new buildings, new roads, as taking it to the people. I love what the Elgin, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, sir, but what's your name? Michael said, which is remember the poor, remember the needy. And I love what Madam Chairman said. Yes, we are the county, that is our business. And I'd like to see it taken closer even to the people than the county can be through our organizations, our nonprofits and community organizations. Thank you.
Well, I will say my reading, the intention of this plan is to help with those things that you mentioned, but it's also recognizing after, I think the example used was after the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009, we saw a lagged response and revenue losses for local governments. And so this is a way to recognize that may occur because of COVID, even though it doesn't, we seem to be doing okay right now. There could be in the coming years, we might see some after effects of this situation. So that's why they built in this component for revenue loss replacement, because it's been recognized that when governments are lacking money, then the hurt gets passed on down to the constituents, and services are cut, taxes are raised, things like that. So I think there's a healthy balance that we can achieve here with both these major components as far as outward into the community, and then what we do with recoup revenue, some of which and much of which will go out into the community in some way or benefit the community in some way. At least that's the goal. That's the intent. It's all over the writing of the American Rescue Plan Act. Yes, help the people, help with the COVID-related effects, help with economic instability and recovery, but also make sure governments are taken care of as well. Mr. Berman.
Yes. One of the things I think we should be cognizant of, that most of the communities within the county have received a considerable amount of money that they're going to be spending on their own efforts within their community. And in some cases, it may be the same thing we're interested in supporting. So I think we have to be cognizant of what the communities are doing and work in conjunction with them rather than double up on something. So that's my only comment. Communities, the big cities got lots of money, and even the smaller cities got a fairly substantial amount of money. So we have to be cognizant of where they're spending it and where we're spending it in those areas. And I think definitely we need to take care of what we are doing in the county first.
If I may,
Madam Chair.
just to tag on to what Mr. Berman has just said, when we move forward with any potential infrastructure support throughout the county, it is required that we get sign-on letters of support, which could include financial support from this fund that the individual villages or townships, not villages and cities, have received, that would partner with this, so that all would be in. So again, I keep on bringing up Wi-Fi. You know that is something that I think is incredibly important for the future growth of Kane County. So if we're going out west, we would address those villages or municipalities that line would be adjacent to, asking not only for a letter of support, which would be required, but also assistance financially with putting those lines through their communities. So it has to work both ways.
Right.
We have a resolution for accepting the first year of revenue recoupment, and there may be some questions for Mr. Onzik. So Joe, if you could stick around, but is there anyone who has any questions for Joe specifically on this discussion item? I do have a couple things to add otherwise. No? Okay, thank you for that presentation, Joe. So I pulled up on the screen here the chart from his projections. And so we have here the full amount, 4.1%. And you can see again that to be determined line, 17.1 million. So something we have to think about is what percentage are we going to claim? Last month, it wasn't clear to me in the reading that we could select other percentages, but I've got confirmation that we can. So we can select anything up to 4.1%. So if we were to take the full amount, all that is left for projects and money going out into the community or things that the county might want to do that doesn't fall under revenue recoupment would be $17.1 million. So that's something we have to start thinking about too, whether we take 4.1% or 3.1%, how much is left for everything else? So at the 4.1%, it's only 17.1 million. At the 3%, we have 30 million. So that's 30 million that can go to organizations like food pantries and family services and things like that, but also to broadband Wi-Fi access out west. So we don't have enough information to make this decision right now, but I want you all to start thinking about that. How much do we want to leave or have in this to be determined section? Another aspect of this is that we can't claim these dollars until the end of our fiscal year. So in 2021, the end of this year, we'll be able to do the actual calculations for lost revenue. And hopefully we do land in close to this 14.5 million that has been projected. We'll find out what the actual number is. But looking ahead, 2022, we're not going to be able to claim that $12.9 million until the beginning of 2023. And the same here in 2023, this 15.4 million, assuming we take the 3%. So another way of thinking about this is if we're going to take the full amount, we won't be able to touch 15.4 million until 2024. It's just one of those moving parts we have to consider, and as far as what we're doing with this money. The good thing is we have time to figure out what to do with that money. We might want to end up using all of this revenue recoupment money, this $50 million or $63.4 million, whatever the actual numbers we choose and that come up. We may come up with a bunch of great ideas that are going to be spent, but in the meantime, we may find out there are a lot of other needs that are very worthy that we all agree we should go after. And so then it may come down to it where this last year of revenue recoupment, we don't claim because that money is going to go out to the community. So I just want you all to start thinking about all these different moving parts so that as we have this conversation more, we're all on the same page and the ideas we come up with are really based on looking at all these different angles.
The chairman question?
Mr. Shepro.
Thank you for those comments because I think they're very important in light of some of the other comments that were made earlier. But my sense is that even though when we say there's only 17 million left, the revenue recoupment does it not afford portals into that could take you back to community-based projects.
Yes, it's government services. So
I mean, it sort of reminds me of when I lived downtown, I was on the condo board and everybody in the living there seemed to feel like it was us against them. It was like, it's all your money. And so I think the points that were made earlier is that this is all the people's money and all we're discussing is how best to benefit the most people. And I think that was the tenor of your comments is that the answer may be direct, it may be indirect through the government because government lost revenue, but it was their revenue, not our revenue.
Yeah, and how we slice this up, I think it's more important for us as the committee. The public isn't going to be so interested. They're just going to want to know, how much are you putting out there to what projects? So we have time to really develop how we're going to use this revenue recoupment money. I mean, my suggestion is personally, we go with the 3% and we claim all 3 years and we just come up with ways to spend it that are going to be beneficial. But as I've told all of you, I'm a facilitator of everyone's ideas. I want to try and find a good middle ground for us all. But I do want all these moving pieces to be in everybody's mind so that as we start honing in on what we want to do, we start thinking about where does that come from? We have this project here. Is that going to be a revenue recoupment project, or is that something that already falls under the ARP? So we can have it under that, it's kind of housekeeping stuff in some sense.
Mr. Chair, question?
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Should we elect to go with the 4.1? And as the years go on, can we change in say 2022 or rather 2023? Can we change and deviate over to the 3.0 for that year? Or if we elect to go with 4.1, is that what we go with for all the years?
We've got options. So for 2021, we could select a 4.1% or we could go lower.
But we don't have
for
to make
2022.
the selections for every year today. We can alter as we
No,
move
we do it
forward.
annually. So each year, at the end of our fiscal year, we get our actual numbers in, and then we can determine, put in the formula 4.1%, 3%, 2%. So there's a lot of maneuverability. We're not going to be making decisions on this that are set in stone. So even if we go at 4.1%, we say today, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take all that money for revenue recoupment. Next year, we might need more than $17 million for community projects and other things. So then we decide, okay, we're not going to take that last year, or we're only going to take 3% or 2%. Mr. Martin.
Being a master of redundancy.
You say that again?
Touche.
Could you repeat that, please?
All that we gain, what we accomplish by approving the 4.1 today is the maximum latitude to make appropriate decisions down the line. So I think this resolution reads that we're going to take 4.1, and when it becomes appropriate, I'll move that we adopt this resolution, and we'll cross financial bridges as we come to them relative to the appropriate level of that money. I mean, if we don't do it, we simply throw money. We lessen our latitude, period. And so when it's appropriate, I will move to adoption of the resolution saying we claim 4.1% for year 2020.
Yes, and that is what it will only be for year 2020. So each year we will have to determine that percentage. So it's kind of just a conceptual thing to say, hey, are we going to go with 4.1, 3%? It's just these moving pieces I want in everybody's mind, because there's that to be determined line that is very important. That's what the community is going to be looking at the most. They're going to want to know what are we spending that money on. So I think it's in our best interest to just keep these things in mind. So yes,
Mr. Chairman?
we can go to different percentages each year.
Bates, please. So my feeling, and I think it is a feeling, is that if we go with the 4.1%, we are psychologically setting ourselves up for a attitude that $17 million will go to the community. And I just feel like it'll be hard to backtrack to say a 3% level where more money will be given out to the community organizations. So I will be voting for 3% or against 4%, whatever
Well,
that
for
is.
this year, it's in our best interest to go with 4.1%.
Okay,
So we're not making any decisions for future years today with this resolution.
all right.
I do think, though, it's a really good idea that we start accumulating ideas for usage of revenue recoupment money. Now, I know we have some ideas already floating around, but the more we can have these conversations amongst ourselves with department heads, the better, so that we can really start mapping out what we're going to do with this money as we go on. Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this committee, but I too agree that we should go with 4.1%. And I really like the idea that each and every year we can decide what we want to do. One of the things I think we're going to find in the next couple of years is that because of salary demands and increases for our people, our budgets are going to be potentially a little bit underwater in the very near future. Having this money in the revenue each and every year to decide how we want to spend it in-house, I think will help balance that budget each and every year. And that's probably going to end up being a priority before we look at new programs or additional things. But once again, that's the pleasure of the board, however they want to vote. But I really do like the idea of using 4.1%. and then each and every year deciding what percentage we're going to use, and realizing that we'll be able to have a better understanding of where our budget is every year too, which will make a big difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Madam Chair.
I agree with the 4.1% for this year, but I would caution the committee from making decisions that are based on current needs, consistent needs, rather than specific project needs. Salaries are going to continue to go up, and yes, perhaps they need to go up. We've discussed that a great deal and we'll continue to have that discussion. But if we're supporting those salaries with this money at the end of the term, when all the money is supposed to be spent and accounted for, we may incur a budget gap. And at that point, what happens to that budget gap? So that's an analysis that we have to carefully take a look at before we start allocating money for that.
Mr. Martin and then Mr. Leonard.
To that point, the money doesn't have to be spent on transient expenses. We can designate the money towards capital projects and what have you, and in a sense, take the strain off of the cash flow for other things by completing a capital project. It's a one-time expense, it's done, and we should get some latitude. But this becomes the other reason why we need to give ourselves the latitude we can this year so that we can sit and have a rational discussion, because all these points are valid, but we're not prepared to arrive at a conclusion today. And the 4.1 gives us that latitude to move ahead and be rational in our analysis.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Martin, and Madam Chair, I agree with your concerns. I think they're very valid. One of my concerns is the fact that since we can only increase our revenue to the county by about $1 million a year, and with payroll increases and benefits far exceeding that, especially if we add people, we are going to have a concern in that area sooner rather than later. The longer we can wait to have to address that, in other words, if we can handle the budget for the next 3, 4 years, 5 years, it's better than having a crisis next year or the following year, where in fact we might be in a position where we'll have to lay people off if we don't have the money coming in.
Certainly one of the uses outlined in this plan is avoiding layoffs, helping retain government employees. But again, I think there is that cautionary premise that if we're going to have new staff and things increases, how do we fund it after this money's gone? So it's multiple moving parts. I'm hearing opportunities for an annual fundraiser in all of this. So.
Sale.
Oh, if I may, CPI, which is what, 2% right now? Is that correct? Approximately, give or take, a little, maybe slightly under. But they're forecasting Social Security, I mentioned this yesterday, 6.1% CPI. So that's going to be going up, and we can maximize it up to 5% if we so choose for property tax, if we want to levy property tax in that direction. So it may be more than $1 million. Currently, right now, it would be approximately that if the board approved that. So that number, again, is variable, and I understand what you are saying, and I do support the issue of what Mr. Martin was saying about taking money into a capital project, because that truly, to me, is the spirit of this. Again, providing long-standing services for our county that may have not been able to be funded previously, which will allow strong economic growth going in the future, which will increase property tax revenue and income back to the county to provide more additional services. But if we take this and just take a look at it more strategically, if we agree to the 4.1 or 3.0, whatever the committee decides, that money then is allocated. A decision has been made. And then we know if it's $17 million, $19 million can go into conversation then about our community support, which would at least start that engagement. And it can then be adjusted, as mentioned, as everyone is given careful consideration and thought for long-term discussion and careful discussion about how that money is going to be spent going forward in the future. And I know our departments have been very excited about the opportunity of presenting programs that they feel would be beneficial to our communities, to our residents for long-term needs that have never been able to be discussed because they've always been pushed back because of lack of resources to do so. So this seems to be incredibly prudent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a resolution to accept the first year of recoupment. Is there anyone that has any other comments that hasn't had a chance to speak? Okay. If I could get a motion and a second to discuss and potentially pass authorizing creation of Fund 356 for recoupment of lost revenue under the American Rescue Plan Act fiscal year 21 budget adjustment and related transfer.
Brown moves.
Brown moves, Martin seconds.
Question,
Ms. Bates?
discussion. So is this for 4.1%?
Yes.
It doesn't say that.
Yes, it does.
It might not in the summary,
Oh.
but if you look in the text, there should be mention of it.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
5, 6, 7. The seventh whereas.
Yeah, the whereases are the meat of our resolutions.
Yeah.
Now therefore. Any questions or comments on this? It's just accepting that first year figure that doesn't change in any of ONSIC's projections because it's the actual numbers, 7.4 million. Okay, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Bates,
No.
Brown,
Yes.
Faraz, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Strathman,
Strathman, yes.
St. Joe's. Motion passes.
Okay, motion passes. All right, thank you, Mr. Onzik, for being here. If you want to stick around, feel free, but otherwise, thank you. Okay, so to our discussion items, discussion item A, summary of meeting with Representative Lauren Underwood. Madam Chair and myself had the opportunity to meet with her a couple weeks ago. She had to fly back to Washington, so unfortunately it was a Zoom call. But I did just want to give a couple of my notes from that meeting, and then Madam Chair can fill in with some of hers. Some interesting things when we brought up the idea of doing broadband, it wasn't, hey, don't go after it, but her immediate response was first look at what other programs and grants are out there and available. And she did follow up with us, her office followed up with us and sent us a list of potential grants that we can go after. Now, after looking at them, we may not really qualify for many of them. And she said that that could be possible. But knowing that we are looking at the broadband issue and how we might be able to make that happen, that was her response was, hey, just see what's out there first. Otherwise, it's an acceptable use. So that was one thing. Another is that childcare. She said that was a very, very important aspect of this and a very, very important usage of these monies, which myself, I wasn't really thinking of. I know Madam Chair is very much interested in that. But as I've learned more and discussed more, I realize how much the lack of adequate childcare is really affecting the economy right now. It's one of the factors driving businesses not being able to hire. So that's something that was very interesting. She said that's a very, very good use of the money. Also, the tourism industry, supporting the tourism and hospitality industry is another really important use just because they didn't get any help from the CARES Act money. They've been really hurt by the COVID pandemic. So that's something that we should definitely be taking an honest look at. And then she also mentioned park districts, saying, don't worry about park districts, send them first to the townships, which is, okay, that's a good idea. Townships deal, with them more closely. But I've learned that the state of Illinois has determined that our Illinois townships in general, do not have the appropriate operational means to handle this money. So they decided not to send money out to townships. So that's a little wrench in that plan. And I would like to follow up with Representative Underwood to find out if she's got any advice on that. And how we might want to handle that, because that's something now we're going to have to consider. Do we want to send money to townships and park districts as well? So those are some of my notes from that meeting that I thought were very interesting. Madam Chair, would you like to add some more?
Thank you. I'll go back to the Wi-Fi. We can just kind of go down the list. I mentioned before the partnerships that are required. So if we're going to be bringing, Roger was kindly shared with me and with Mr. Sanchez the need for Wi-Fi and what it looks like. Up and down the Fox River Valley, Randall Road corridor, fine. There's enough connections. As we go further west, there's none. So we serve that population, we serve those communities, we were in charge of those because they're unincorporated. Those are the areas that we would look to getting partnerships with the municipalities and the villages to see if they'd be willing to support this. They've just received their allocation. I believe a list of those resources were sent to you. If not, we'll make sure we get those out to you quickly. I had Roger put that spreadsheet together for me for all of Kane County, so it's much easier to digest. So we can see how much Campton Hills received, which was over $300,000. We're not talking about significant amount of money, but it does range. So that would be one thing that we have to do, and to see if there's any other opportunities. Regarding mental health and childcare, it was her suggestion, and we're putting together just a small informational meeting with our educators and with our community healthcare providers, specifically in the mental health arena, to see if we can start developing just some knowledge of what is needed for our students going back to school. It has also been noted that many of our children going back to school have extreme stress, anxiety. CASA has shared with us that there is a great deal of child abuse, the dramatic increase in child abuse here in Kane County. Some of those stresses are economic, lack of food, and opportunity. So if we can partner with them to find out what the needs are for these children, and then bring that proposal back to this committee for your consideration, that does have the full support of our Congresswoman, and I think it would have the full support of our community. Our children are critically important, and I think we can all agree with that. With childcare, yes, there is a need. I do not support, and I will say that again, I do not support Kane County going into the childcare business. It's not our level of expertise, but there are many childcare providers who could provide resources for us so that we knew what would be appropriate funding for this. It is a great need. It's an economic need. Perhaps I'm more sensitive to it, and I don't mean to put the gender card forward, but women have always been the primary care providers traditionally for families, and that has had the biggest impact upon our economy nationwide. More women have stayed home from work to provide for their children and to provide for their education during this time of pandemic than their male counterparts. So we want to make sure that women have the opportunity to go back to work, and we should take a look at childcare. And obviously that is in full support. So those are the kinds of projects we took a look at and we talked about, and we will continue to discuss whether it's county support through that 4.1% money, or if it's community support.
Mr. Shepro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of thoughts. One, I think, when you look across the country, apropos of the comment about townships, in many states, townships have far more power and authority than they do here. And in addition to the park districts, I think perhaps Congress overlooked, in Illinois at least, the fire districts. As we know from the CARES Act committee, there are 34 fire departments in King County, and only I think 6 or 7 of them are municipal fire departments where they can tap into money from their city grants. The rest of the fire districts, which range from very large like North Aurora or Fox River, Elburn, to the very tiny, don't have that ability. And I hope, as we did with the CARES Act, that this committee will take a serious look at those. I'm reminded, just jumping around, I think it is predated COVID and all of that. I think there's always been a dilemma in 2-income households, is when one spouse is deciding whether to take a job and discovering that the cost of childcare is going to exceed what they might make if they went to work. And that's, I think, a problem that needs to be addressed. And finally, back to the townships, there's been a program called Ride and Cane for a number of years that townships opt into. That's very spotty, as I understand it, around the county. We have some that I think Hampshire Township has a very good program for getting seniors. It's a way of getting seniors to medical appointments and things where they don't have their own transportation. And yet the township that has a huge retirement and senior citizen community has nothing like that. You know, I agree that we don't want to get into that business directly, but I think those are programs where if we can equalize them among the different parts of the county, we would be going a far distance toward bringing equity of opportunity to people who are in need but don't get it if they live in the wrong township.
Thank you. Ms. Wojnicki was next, and then Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Jared. Wojnicki here. Let's see, park districts are extremely rare in townships. A park district is more of a municipal umbrella or function. The townships have the open space programs, which were passed by referendum or referenda, and are definitely categorized differently than park districts. And so the park districts, municipalities are receiving funds as well as the county. So I think it would be up to them to decide if they want to use any of the funds on park districts. I think you and I talked, Jared, that townships were excluded from the recovery, the rescue plan money.
They're not excluded specifically. It's left to the discretion of the state governments to determine if they want to allocate money to townships or not. I believe they call them, MCDs. I can't remember what it's called, but it's up to the discretion of the state. And Illinois has determined that they're not going to send it to
They're not
townships.
going to,
So
'cause
I just found that out a few days ago when
Okay.
I finally looked into it and see, because they just released the money for municipalities last week.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I just want to agree somewhat with Ken Shepro there. I think the Ride and Cane program is a fantastic program, and that's generally run by townships. So it's too bad Illinois didn't maybe specify, we'll support townships if it's for programs, something of that sort, to help the seniors or to help children. So,
yeah, it's something for us to consider. Mr. Martin?
yeah.
From my perspective, I think it's important when we talk about providing funds to other governmental bodies that we remember that we're a governmental body that has all of these needs. And I remember through the CARES Act that when we asked for proven COVID-related expenses from all of these other bodies, relatively speaking, they were fairly minimal. And I don't know that this money, which could be put to the benefit of what I consider to be our premier governmental body, which is the county, should be spent to assist expansion of a park district's program of some kind or other. If we're dealing with problems that are related to COVID, I've become more conversational, but this is the governmental body to which we have all sworn allegiance is the county. And before I want to support others, I want to make certain that we have been creative and dealt with our own needs and goals.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I just think it's a little early right now, but we're going to be finding out what the needs of the townships might be under the rubric of the American Rescue Plan. Same for park districts. And then also, again, how can municipalities help out with that? Because all municipalities have received some money. So we're not quite there yet to determine if we want to help But that's something that we're going to have to consider at least. Do we help townships out since they're not getting their own money? And the same for park districts. Or do we partner with municipalities? Is there a request, hey, we just need $20,000 for this or that? I don't know. It's something we have to at least keep in mind as a possibility. Ms. Wojnicki?
Thank you, Jared. Just to clarify, as I said earlier, well, actually this morning I met with the village president of the Village of Campton Hills, and they're getting their own funding. So, but actually Campton Hills does not have a park district. Let's just take the city of St. Charles or the city of Geneva. If they choose to, fund the parks in some way, it's up to them. I'm not saying that should be the county's prerogative to do that. So I just want to clarify that.
We're definitely not required to.
Uh-huh.
It's just something to consider.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mr. Kenyon, you had a question or comment?
Yesterday during the coroner's presentation, he said they've had a number of people who died because of lack of medical care. They don't go to the doctor. Maybe they can't afford. You don't get a mammogram or you don't get a PSA test for a male and then it goes too far. Maybe there's a way we can do that. We'll also probably have a need to get people educated to work in childcare. I'm thinking of a scholarship program. Well, and that would be a long-term investment that would help that. So
Yeah.
it's
There's a lot of
that goes along with doing things. It's not like throwing money at them, but what is it like in the Bible? Remember that thing? Teach
him
a
how
man
to fish.
and you won't have to feed him.
Madam Chair.
There's a organization in Aurora, the Women Business Enterprise Program, that specializes in childcare, especially home care, in developing that, and they have grants already and funding opportunities that if that is what we're looking at, I would highly recommend that we bring in them and their expertise to discuss how that is managed.
What group was that?
Women's Business Enterprise
And
Council.
Spark too.
So they obviously, by the very nature of it, they support women's businesses, but that is one of their niche markets.
Mr. Shepard, quickly before we move on.
Mr. Kenyon's comment about yesterday reminds me that going back to the mental health issue, I believe the regional superintendent noted that one of the causes of homelessness that their office has seen causing truancy is directly related to mental health issues. And that just seems to be some additional reasons why the focus on that is so critical.
Mr. Chairman?
Quickly, Ms. Bates.
This won't be too quick, but I'll make it as quick as I can.
Is it relevant and important, or can it wait?
Definitely. No. I believe that there's an 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that's that nobody wants to raise taxes. Nobody ever wants to raise taxes. And yet we're treating this windfall as if it's a gift to the county, and so we don't have to raise taxes ever. But I believe we have to face the reality that this money, sometimes you want to build a building, maybe you have to raise taxes. I don't want to do that. But let's not treat this windfall as if it's ours to spend. There.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next discussion item, administrative staff update. Just wanted to let you guys know, we put the RFPs out for a third-party consultant firm and for project manager. And also, for a firm that may have a project manager, it was an option given. The deadline is August 3rd. We originally thought maybe we could do 2 weeks and learn pretty quickly that's not a long enough time to get good responses. So we set it for 21 days. And then we had an applicant that said, hey, that's also a little short. Can you add a few more days on to that? So we went 26 days. And so August 3rd is the deadline. We're going to get things in. We want to get things reviewed by staff and then have the committee look at it and select the applicants that we want before the next county board meeting, because we need, as Mr. Onzik had indicated, we need people that can handle putting our reports together and getting them submitted on time. We have 2 reports that are due on August 31st. So it's very important that we have the adequate staff resources to do that. So my thinking is that August 3rd is the next Tuesday. The deadline, I believe, is 3:00. So the next day we'll have all of the applications in. We'll start reviewing them. I would like to have just a special meeting of this committee either next Friday on the 6th or the following Monday on the 9th, specifically to select the third-party consultant and or project manager. This would be the only discussion, the only item on the agenda. I would encourage everyone to just call in via Zoom to make it easy for everyone, because we're going to want to have another one of these meetings with, the big conversation and decisions, maybe the following week. So is that something that is doable for you guys? Either Friday the 6th or Monday the 9th? We could set it for, normal business hours anytime. Again, just Zoom, come in, discuss what we need to discuss. You will have all of the information well ahead of that. I will get it to you as soon as I get it, let you guys start looking at it. Obviously, staff is going to have some recommendations. State's attorney, IT, finance, people that worked very closely with our previous third-party administrator that have a lot of good input to give us, that have given some very good input already. So does the 6th work? Mr. Martin, no? The 9th works for you? Does the 9th work for everybody else? Doesn't work for you, even for call-in?
No.
Okay, well, we'll have to figure that out. So I'll follow up with you guys after this to get down to brass tacks. We just need a quorum. And if you can't be here, then perhaps, you can at least tell us who you would vote for just to help influence maybe some decision-making. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty clear choices, but we're still waiting to see things coming in. So just to let you know, that's going to be coming up, and I will follow up with you.
Will
Madam Chair.
that have to go into executive session because it's a personnel matter?
I am not actually sure if that will have to go into executive session.
Maybe
I don't know if the
when
state's
that time
attorney would
comes,
know.
when you arrange the meeting, talk to the state's attorney.
Yeah,
To discuss who we hire?
yeah, to
Or
discuss.
or not
that.
rehire, to hire.
Yeah, I don't think that's a,
Yeah, I wouldn't think so
That's
either,
a
but we
closed
can get a verification
Okay.
on that. So that's the next big steps for administrative staff. Also, we do still need an administrative assistant for this committee. I thought I had one, but things changed, so I actually don't. My goal is to have an administrative assistant for this committee that could do things, including running the meeting, so that our current staff doesn't have to use up more time, resources to do that. So if you guys know anyone online, anyone in the audience who would like to work part-time, 20 hours a week, $25 an hour, they can do PowerPoint and Excel a little bit, and they can come to these meetings and, summarize things very well for us, good verbal and written skills, please send them my way. Okay, that's it for the administrative staff update. Let's go on to another big discussion item, project requests and process.
that's probably pretty minor, right?
Pretty mild,
Minor.
pretty minor, yeah. So just some things that are in my head that I want in everyone else's as well. We have different kinds of requests that we're going to want to process. I was calling them internal and external before. I think a good way of talking about it really is departmental requests and then community support grants. So departmental requests is anything that comes from our departments that could include, obviously things going out in the community like broadband, and even tourism is something that has been brought to us by our own staff as well as from the outside. For departmental requests, I think that's an easier one for us to get going more quickly. So I'm going to be working with some of Roger's guys soon to develop the portal, the online portal for our departments to submit their requests. Possibly we might be able to get that done this week, possibly, and have it up and running maybe Friday or next Monday. So I think it would be in our best interest to set a deadline once that portal is open and we can allow submissions. I'm thinking a 2-week deadline. What do you guys think about that? Does that seem like an adequate amount of time for the departments who have already been working on their ideas? They know more so than a lot of some of the public entities or public community organizations. I think our departments have been looking at this money like, okay, how can I get in on that? So I feel 2 weeks will be enough. If a department came back and said, hey, we do need a little more time, we can grant that. We did that last year for some of our programs. We would extend deadlines when necessary. But what do you guys think about that? A 2-week deadline?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. If we're able to get the portal open by this Friday, 2 weeks out would be Friday, August 13th. I know it's a very auspicious number to some, but if you look at the history, it's really just the day that the Knights Templar were arrested by the king. So it's really not a sign of bad luck, just politics.
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yeah,
just
Mr.
for
Fonsack.
the portal part of it, if we're going to have it live, probably by Monday or Tuesday next week would be optimistic, I
Okay.
think, just to be
Okay.
fair to everybody.
Mhm. Okay. All right, but a 2-week deadline. So then once we have it open, we can communicate that and we'll set the date at that time and I'll let all the departments know, hey, get in there and submit your requests. My understanding is that we want everything to be ARP related. If it's going to be revenue recoupment, maybe we accept those now, maybe we don't. I don't know what your feelings are on that and maybe getting a little ahead of our potential uses of this, but what do you guys think about that? Do you want the departments to throw everything, including revenue recoupment possibilities, or just stuff that is within the ARP rubric? Mr. Shepro.
Do we feel that the rules and the guidelines are sufficiently clear that people know the difference between a revenue recoupment-based project and something else? And apropos of the folks out in the audience and in the community, I'm thinking that they probably don't have a sufficient background, and I wondered if some sort of a informational session, meeting, whatever, that we or our experts could put on that would explain what the rules are. Because I know with the CARES Act, because we had such narrow time constraints, a lot of people didn't quite understand exactly how to apply or what they could get. And it seemed to me that here that would be a useful, especially for the community folks, to put something like that together. And maybe the department heads all know the rules, but I'm thinking that they still seem to be a little on the arcane side.
Well, we did have a committee of the whole presentation. Assistant State's Attorney Vince Coyle gave us a presentation on the basics of the guidelines.
I bet we'd all flunk if we took a test on what was in that.
But it exists, so
Yeah.
it's there for anyone to go back and listen to online on YouTube. Also, there's the NACO, a summary of the plan. That's usually what I give to people. It's the best summary that I found. It's most useful, at least in my understanding. So there's adequate resources for department heads and all the excess staff that they have to help them look into these things. If they need help understanding, they can ask us. I think all they have to do is look at everything outside of revenue recoupment and just say, hey, what's within this that we have in the hopper or that we could put together, send it our way. And then if there's other ideas they have that would fall under revenue recoupment, send that as well. That's my opinion, that we just have them send everything, but there will be a differentiation. Is this something under, which category of the ARP is it under? I just wanted your guys' thoughts on that because we're going to develop the portal. So if you find any reason that we shouldn't accept ideas and requests that are within the revenue recoupment, that's what I need to know, really. Otherwise, we'll just tell them to send in everything. Mr. Brown.
I think both would be appropriate, but keep it separated. I mean, that way we've got an idea on everybody's thoughts on the whole project.
Yeah. And I want to include things as well, like, is this an all or nothing funding proposal? If we give you half, is that still going to be adequate?
Right.
If they have 5 different requests, could they please prioritize them? Similar to what we did last year with the CARES Act. So then after the deadline, we close the portal, and then we'll put together a spreadsheet or some kind of presentation for everyone so we can go through all of the requests and see, the total dollar amount. And then what do we select? What do we choose? Kind of, the riverboat. We're not going to have a staff member that's going to go through with a formula and kind of pre-vet everything necessarily. Maybe we will if we have a project manager that can put that together for us adequately. But otherwise, we'll follow a similar process to last year and list everything out and go from there.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Bates.
Comment. So in the summary here from NACO, there's 5 spending focuses, foci. One is the recoupment. So that would be the block for the recoupment. Then all the other things, support public health, negative impacts like nonprofits, water and sewer, that's environmental, so that's
Mhm.
near and dear to my heart. Those things would all be in the other bucket, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, water resources has some ideas, but if they turned around and said, hey, we also want a new building, well, that goes into revenue recoupment. Everything else goes into the other categories. So any other questions or comments on this concept with the departmental request? Okay, because that's the first portal we're going to get put together and opened up. So the next one, the community support grants, that's the one the public is looking at the most. We want to put a portal together for that. I don't know how long that's going to take. Maybe next week we'll be able to start working on that. I have to go at the speed. Oh, Mr. Martin.
Relative to the community support aspect of this, I think it's important, recalling back to the CARES Act administration, that we put in place limiting criteria so that we're not balancing one group's request for a new air conditioner against somebody else's request to buy food. I think we would serve the purpose better if we had order to that process that gave it some predictability. I'm going to presume, and maybe I'm wrong, that the demands that we receive are going to exceed the resources. And if I want to respond to people, it would be better to say the board chose these criteria, and this is one of the reasons you didn't get your money. And we need to do that anyway. We can't just simply say, send in a request, or we'll go nuts and we will not do a good job of what we're supposed to do.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. We absolutely have to have some sort of list of criteria. And even then, I think the demand will outweigh the allocation. It's similar to the riverboat. The riverboat comes in, we have this much money, we have this much in requests. We winnow it down to make them both fit. So, but it is very important. That was part of my notes too. For the community support grants, once we get the portal open, I'm thinking a 30-day window for application might be more necessary, or what do you guys think about that? I can't recall what we did last year. It was everything was coming so fast. I don't remember if we did 30 days. Mr. Martin.
I would
How do
agree.
we manage this in the context of not knowing each year how much money we're going to have until the following year? And for example, if I'm a not-for-profit and I file an application in 2021, okay, and I'm in the queue. Well, what do I have that same need in 2022, or do I have a different need? I mean, it's almost like we do this on an annual basis, which more and more means that we need really to have some stringent application criteria if we're gonna.
Yeah, and so that's again, there's so many moving parts and different ways that we can do this. One of my thoughts was that we have everyone put in their request this year, and they distinguish, is this a request for funds that is only going to be for this year or for the next year, or is this a multi-year request? So if we have a group that knows they're going to have these kinds of costs for the next 3 years, do we accept that this year? You see what I mean? Or do we, so I think that the most important piece really is getting a sense of, let me share my screen again.
I just think that the broader the brush we require, the more likely we're going to do a good job.
Yeah. Well, this is the important number right here, and this to be determined, because that gives us a sense of how much we can start out with. If we look at the very bare minimum we'll have in that to be determined, $17.1 million. So that's assuming that we'll end up recouping all of that other lost revenue and find uses for it. So it's something that as a committee, do we just start off with, let's create a fund for community support grants at $17.1 million and then start work from there? Do we say, okay, for this year, we're going to allocate, $5 million to the community, things like that, Mr. Martin?
Well, am I correct that we put a number in, but then that is treated as an estimate? And so we put in 4.1% today. If it proves that was at 2.5, we can't, the county then doesn't get the 4.1, does it?
We have it.
We can take the 4.1
We can take
every
the
year.
4.1.
Okay, all
The
right.
numbers we don't know are the actual revenues that we'll have for each fiscal year.
I know, but
That'll change.
But that will change. So we can't make to your point of a multi-year request. We don't know how much money we're going to have in 2022.
No.
Isn't
we
this
don't.
really
Can't
like the
really deal with anything
riverboat
but
process? I mean, you've already alluded to that.
I see similarities.
Yeah,
There's just more complexities to this.
yeah.
So
One of though is it riverboat, if I'm correct, this is Shepro talking, it does not normally approve multi-year
correct.
requests. I mean, it might be a multi-year project, but it still would go a year at a time.
But we know
We have
set
the ability
amount of
maybe
money.
to do that, but then you're going to be looking at potentially, you have to decide if you want to encourage multi-year projects. The comment was made earlier about, I think in theory, the riverboat money is not supposed to be a permanent, subsidy for somebody. It's supposed to address particular projects and particular needs. And somebody's saying, we'd like, $20,000 a year or whatever for some long period of time would not seem to be in the spirit of what we're being asked to do with the money.
Ms. Bates?
Thank you. I'm going along with what Mr. Shepro said about a informational meeting for the departments, which we didn't think we needed. I think we need some informational meetings for the public, which might extend that 30 days, which I don't really want to do, but sort of some town hall type meetings to invite all of our nonprofits to understand the criteria.
Well, again, there is adequate resources available, but this is something that can most definitely be worked into the town hall idea, I would imagine.
There's resources,
Chair.
but it's not the same
Hold on,
as
Mr. Shepherd.
having questions and answers.
If I may, the needs of our county are diverse and immense. Whether we talk about childcare, homelessness, food, mental health, adequate transportation for our seniors, making the senior care. I mean, that $17 million is insignificant in money to support the greater needs of the county. I think we can all agree to that. What concerns me right now is we spend a lot of time talking about allocation, et cetera. I believe it, in my opinion, that this committee really should hone down its focus. If we go broad brush and say, we want everybody's input, you're going to be inundated and you're not going to be able to make thoughtful decisions because your hearts are going to be pulled in so many different directions, whether we want to support fire protection districts or townships or transportation or childcare. I really think it's important to have a good discussion and really narrow it down to what the focus is based on the criteria presented by the Treasury on what this money is to be used for. And then with that, we can't help everybody, but we can make significant impact upon certain areas that will have long-lasting effect for the community. So it concerns me that we're going very broad instead of narrowing it down into some focus.
Well, I think we're just starting off with everything because that's the goal, is to begin narrowing things down. We're not going to come up with our program today. But I think a very important aspect of this is the needs assessments. That's a discussion item I have on here, and I actually don't have much to report because they're still coming in. We're still gathering the needs assessments. So as we take a look at all of the potential uses of this money and the related organizations out in the community, understanding what the real needs are based on data, I think will also help us focus a little bit more as well.
And it just, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, and then I'll be quiet. The community needs help now. It's now. We have hungry people now. We have people who are in mental health crisis now. and why I appreciate the concern and the making sure that we have the data drawn and we have a broad brush and an analysis. People are going hungry now, and people are committing suicide right now. And the longer this committee decides and the board decides what to do with this money, the more people are going to go hungry and the more people are going to commit suicide and the more opioid crises we're going to have. And these are all fundable things that we have the power and to empower our organizations to help now.
And your point is well taken, Madam Chair. Something we should keep in mind, though, we don't have yet a third-party consultant group to vet all of our project requests that come in. That's something that we absolutely have to have. When we start taking applications from community organizations, we're not going to have that in place until at least after the next county board meeting. And then that firm is going to be very busy working on putting our reports together. So once that process is finished, then we can start vetting applicants. And my plan is that we have our criteria for community projects already established by the time our third-party consultant is ready to start taking a look at those. So I would love to just start handing checks out today. I know I've got my wish list in organizations that I know, there are people that are going hungry, like you said, but we do have to have the appropriate infrastructure in place administratively so that we can manage all of those requests.
And I don't disagree with that at all. But what I think is important is that they're facilitating the decisions made by this committee of what they're going to be funding. So if the committee decides that they want to support food banks or whatever decision is going to be made, Bright and Kane, which is an incredibly worthy organization to support, that decision's already been made and we say, here, vet it, rather than still having much conversation about what we're going to be looking at. So I'm going much more specific onto what we already know the needs are. We can bring Michael up here and we could tell him, please, tomorrow, bring us a report from every food bank here in Kane County and tell us what their needs are. And he's already shared some of the data, and that's just in Elgin. We have Aurora, which has critical needs. Batavia has critical needs. We know for Batavia has critical needs. So I agree, we have to have the support staff to put that together. We're preparing for that, but let's move quickly and effectively and well.
At the next main meeting of this committee, I would hope that we could establish those criteria and determine which kinds of community organizations that we want to start helping out more soon than later. Mr. Martin.
Well, I either misspoke or created confusion when I talked about a broad brush. What I really, and I'm much more in accord with Madam Chair's comments than it may have appeared. We need to have a narrow list of criteria, and that's going to exclude some charities. It's going to include some charities. But when I'm talking about a broad brush, I'm saying I think misspeaking. Maybe what we need is a short list, and live with the fact that some charities aren't going to be receiving money. But if we're going to get this done and get it done well, it's got to be a manageable process. And we found that out under the CARES Act. There were criteria there that excluded some people, and we had to, evaluate certain circumstances, but we set limits and we kept them and we got the job done. And what I'm kind of arriving at a conclusion is this is an annual affair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to do it now with our 7 million, and next year we're going to do it with whatever we have next year. So we'd better have something simple in place, because if we have to reinvent this wheel every year, you're going to have trouble finding people to serve on the committee.
It was 2 weeks that we have this figured out.
Yeah.
How's that? I'll need everyone's help. Yeah, we can do it.
I think we need a thin brush.
Thin brush. I think we need options. Okay, so yeah, so I think a 30-day deadline will be good once we establish a portal and we know the criteria, the kinds of organizations that we're going to accept applications from. And we can make sure that we're communicating to all those organizations so that everyone is aware of it. It's in the news. Some other things to consider, I'll go over these briefly because we are running low on time, and I'll send these out to you guys. Just looking at some other counties, one of the things I noticed is there's many that have their own goals, strategic plans, and visions. So that's something that also may help this committee to determine what kinds of things that they would want to fund. So just real quick, coming from the Kane County vision statement, some of these things don't apply to ARP, but some do. I think good steward of natural and economic resources, adapting to and providing governmental services to a growing and diverse population, promoting an environment that advocates health, welfare, and safety. So some of these things already exist in our planning documents, our guiding documents that I think can help us winnow away at all these potentials that we have for usage. The 2040 plan also is another one. Access to healthy food choices, clean air, and safe water. That's ARP right there. Planning for healthy results, standard practice for local government. We want to improve the health of our people. So these are some things for us all to consider. So I will be sending this information and others out to you guys before our next meeting. I'll be following up with you, really kind of encouraging all the ideas to come together so that when we get to our next meeting, we've already made some good headway on where we might want to land as far as community grant projects. And then we'll figure out the rest during the meeting. Okay, so another, we have potential projects. So we have these expenditure categories, that's where I should start, that we have in our reporting. These are all the different categories that cover everything in the plan and all the potential uses. So I just went through, and based on the conversations I've had with people and based on some of the things I'm seeing, I just put in bold some of the things that are already on the table and being discussed, some potentials for consideration. So for departmental, in this public health, obviously, this is going to be coming from the public health department. Mr. Isaacson just sent me a preliminary concept of what this might look like, the health department ask as far as mental health goes. And so I'm going to be following up with him to kind of hash that out a little bit more. Negative economic impacts as far as departmental requests are concerned that I know of. There's potential there for job training assistance. And then obviously tourism. We have Janice Hill, who's going to be speaking with us very shortly on this concept. Education assistance, mental health. This was alluded to a little bit. Madam Chair discussed our conversation with Representative Underwood. There's some potential there to work with the Regional Office of Education. So I just went through and just to give you guys some more things to think about where we're at in conversations internally, departmentally, things that we could do. And then I did the same. Sorry, it's lagging. I did the same for suggested community grant considerations. These are ideas that I've heard from you guys or I've heard from actual organizations, mental health, substance abuse, obvious eviction prevention, aid to nonprofit organizations, tourism, other impacted industries, childcare, services to foster youth, that I'm thinking CASA right there, services for unhoused persons. So we have a lot of different things in the expenditure categories that have already been a part of the conversations that I've had with many of you and with staff. So I just put that together as just another way for you to start thinking about, you know, what's some of the more likely projects we want to get involved in. Ms. Bates reached out to all the members of the board. I was hoping to get a sense from all of them of some of the organizations in their districts that may be benefited from this money. And she also went ahead and asked everybody what they would like to spend the money on as well. So I did another chart here with the same expenditure category distinctions. And I put everybody's responses in. I took the names off, so this is anonymous. You guys aren't going to get called out for your ideas, don't worry. But you can see here, I'll go to full view.
So you put occurrences, mental health.
Yeah, if it's on the sheet you gave me, I put it in. She sent that to me, I think this morning, so I just put this together earlier today. But you can see right away, public health, mental health is a very popular consideration amongst board members. 708 board is something that's come up a couple times. Under negative economic impacts. So here you have a lot of organizations as well as ideas like paid back COVID expenses, solid economic development plan, things like that. So a lot of good organizations that I think we should be considering as far as a category, you know, mental health services, social services, food pantries, homeless shelters, things like that, Boys and Girls Club. Here are services to disproportionately impacted communities, childcare, that comes up multiple times. Pre-arrest diversion, family counseling, scholarships for ECC. I'm guessing that was Mr. Kenyon's suggestion. Help for fire protection districts. I don't know who that was. And childcare again down here. Premium pay. I put some asterisks next to some of these. Preventing future layoffs. Again, that's something that we can do. We want to just be careful. That's an important conversation we have to have. Again, going back to what we said, you know, not getting ahead of funding something that can't be funded beyond this money. Infrastructure, we have broadband was the only thing people mentioned. Revenue replacement ideas. Help the departments, help legal, new county government center, 30 mil. Request for departments, obviously. So there's a little list here that you guys can check out. There's some things on here like East Dundee parking garage. That's perhaps a little outside of the ARP money. So we're gonna have to take a look at that and see if that's even a possibility before we can even consider it. So again, all the ideas that you send us, we'll get vetted out and we'll be able to determine pretty quickly. These ones are acceptable use, these ones are not, so that we know. Not for a building, we like our old building.
I know.
And so that was it. That was the result of the survey. I sent a survey out to you guys just with the funding categories and no information. So this, and 3 responses came back. So this was actually better. So I want to thank you, Mavis, for doing that.
Can I make a
together.
comment?
Sure.
I want to thank everybody who talked to me about this and all your wonderful, thoughtful thoughts. And thank you, Jared. You did a great job of reorganizing.
Keeping it anonymous too.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add under that? After all of that, another aspect that we do want to consider for project requests in this process is municipal and other units of local government. We don't have to really get into that now. We've already kind of touched that in many aspects already in this conversation. But we know now that townships aren't receiving money. We are very interested in partnerships with municipalities. Any way that we can make these dollars stretch. They're just getting their money. Hopefully they've already been taking a look at potential uses and have been coming up with their own plans. But we do want to encourage municipalities to think about ways that we can work together so that, you know, when we get to that point, we can start talking to them and potentially open up some money in that direction. Fire protection districts, library districts, these are all things that we have to consider. All the other local units of government, we're not going to figure that out today or even probably in the next meeting. So just wanted on everybody's radar. Next discussion item, needs assessments. Like I said, we're still gathering information and we'll use that wherever we can to help make decisions, but we won't wait on it and be beholden to it. It's just something good to have, especially for our reporting when we want to justify our projects. We don't need needs assessments, but if we could say, oh, and also it's backed up by this data. So it's just something that's going to be a part of our ongoing reporting.
The Foxville United Way has done a recent needs assessment. Maybe we can collect various needs assessments from
I'm in the
throughout the
process.
county.
Again, administrative assistant, we're looking for help if anyone knows anyone. Help me get these things done a little more quickly. Mr. Shepro.
This probably goes without saying, but I think one criteria clearly should be what other programs or sources are there available before they want our money. We know that there are lots of programs out there and many of them overlap. Many of them say you can use it to complement something. Others say you can't apply for more than one. And I know for fire protection districts, there were many sources for at least limited sources available. And I suppose we want to know that we aren't everybody's first choice if there are other choices that are equally good available.
All right. Any questions on needs assessments? Any comments? No. Okay. Moving on to tourism industry support. That is something that Madam Chair and I have met with a couple tourism bureaus in the county to get a sense of what their needs are and what a funding request could look like. So that's being worked on right now, but there is a lot of need in the tourism industry because no one was traveling for a whole year. And that's an industry that has certainly been hurt, in hospitality as well. So it's something that, again, we'll be coming to you with. I think at some point we're going to have presentations by organizations that are requesting money. But we do have some considerations coming from our own departments that relate to ARP things. And I think tourism is one that's an easy one to kind of start this conversation on request and the needs out in the community beyond things that we are well aware of, such as mental health, drug addiction and things like that. We know there are needs out there for that, but we want to see more of some of these other categories. So we asked Janice Hill to come and talk to us. She presented an idea at Agriculture Committee last week, and I don't know that she was thinking of American Rescue Plan stuff at all. So it was kind of fortuitous that it was coming together just on the heels of our meeting with some local travel bureaus. And her idea just fits in so nicely with the entire conversation we had and how tourism could be increased, promoted, enhanced in Kane County. So Janet, I'll let you take over. What do you got for us?
Yes, thank you. Exactly. That's exactly how it came about. We prepare programs and concepts for Agriculture Committee every month along with policy decisions. This one came about from something that happens often is that we're talking with farmers. And I happened to be out at Wiltsey's farm talking to Kate Wiltsey on Father's Day when I went out to get her strawberries. Her strawberries are there just like strawberries are, only a couple weeks of the year. And if you're not there at the right time, you will miss that. And I talked about the nice drive. Of course, their farm is right at the county line. I'm west of Randall. And we talked about what a beautiful drive it was to get there and how a lot of people just don't even know about that. And getting people off Randall Road and west to visit not only Wiltsey's, but the other farms, as well as to see the scenic drive out there. And then even if you have time to go to the forest preserves, all of the other natural assets that we have in the county and to take advantage of that. How wonderful that is, a mental break, physical, and certainly good for your health. And she said, well, can we, we really need some kind of a trail, farm trail, some directions that get people where they need to go. And I said, yes, we know that. I've been talking to Steve Arnold at Farm Bureau. We've talked about this for a while. I'll bring it up with Mark, which I did the following Monday. And we said, let's just put this on Ag Committee. And so I started doing a little bit of research, just kind of top level, prepared this presentation that you're about to see. I will say that when we're proposing concepts, we try to do three things. We try to ground it in research. We look at national research, and that's what I did with this one. We're looking at economic and we're looking at health. We learned that from the national grants that we've had to work on, especially from health, that we have to ground that in that. But at the same time, we always look at our local research, and you know that we have recently surveyed our 50 local farms and have talked to them about what their needs are. And so we have a sense of that. And then we continue that conversation in person, sometimes through Ag Committee, sometimes through those interchanges that are conversations like I just described. And then finally, I would say that we know our limits. You know that even though I work in agriculture here for 20 years, I am a land use planner. I am not a tourism expert, and I am not a farmer. So I know my limits, and when there's more than I know, then it's time to hire experts to kind of take us to the next level. That's when I come to you and say, hey, we need to hire a consultant to, finalize these ideas or ground truth them or bring us, and we've done that every time. And I think that's what's made our project successful over time. So with all that said, this is a concept. It needs a lot more refinement and a lot more work with partners, with farmers, and we'll continue to do that with Ag Committee. But it does really fit nicely with the idea of tourism, I think. So I came up with the idea of river to field for a couple reasons. Obviously, the Fox River is probably our most critical water resource, but also our healthy, when it comes to healthy activity, it certainly provides that as well. And it has quietly been going through the system of getting approval and recognition as a national water trail. And my colleague Kieran Miller has been taking it through, along with organizations like Fox River Ecosystem Partnership, taking it through that process. Once it is designated as a national water trail, the attention that it's going to have as a recreational location will be elevated nationally. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. It's ours for the portion that travels through Kane County, but it certainly will have more functions than just, our water source and our source for activity. But we also have west of that river and the trails alongside it that you've invested in, those wonderful trails adjacent. We have oak savannas. We have our farmland protection program with protected lands, scenic roads, the farmers markets. I heard that Illinois in general has more farmers markets than almost any place in the country. And certainly we have our foundational markets that our farmers bring their goods to. We have all these trails that come to the Fox River. So we have a lot of assets that revolve around nature and activity. And when I looked at other research, these two things are coming together. Farm trails and farm trail programs have existed for quite a while on the East Coast. California, of course, is known for their wine trails. But bringing these two concepts of food, farm, and some kind of nature recreation component is really what's happening right now in the industry. It's not like we haven't thought about that before. We certainly have at times with our local food program featured and tried to work with our local restaurant industry and connecting them with our local farms. I've worked on that before. We've heard and incorporated in our 2040 plan and 2030 plan, even I think, from the equestrians and the trails and that entire industry, which is kind of very low key in terms of visibility, but certainly brings lots of revenue to our county and really probably needs a little bit more work and attention, I think. And of course, fishing is a huge activity and grew during COVID. That was one of the activities that I think is viewed as just very accessible. And then the little chart you really can't see up at the top, but very well, and I'll in future, I'll bring that back up. But we had an increase in tree cover by 5%, and we were one of the top counties. And that's really important to note because we know that for the cooling effect and quality of life, that's essential and we need to keep that growing. All these things add to our quality of life here in Kane County. The reason why people invest and live here, but also become a reason to visit and spend money here. As far as a campaign to bring this all together from the fabulous Fox Water Trail, the idea is to take this concept of people that might be visiting the river for that purpose and keep them here and focus them on everything that we have to offer in countywide, top to bottom and all the way west to the county line. So of course, we obviously have things in all the cities that are opportunities, but if we highlighted those that particularly focus on local food, farms, and nature in particular, farm heritage, rustic roads, and outdoor activities, that would be the focus of that, and take that all the way to the county line. That could be a theme for this. Outdoor, just a little bit of research on outdoor recreation. Obviously, that increased during the pandemic. Lots of people. I think I knew that outdoor photography was a big activity. I enjoyed a lot from Facebook. This was one that kind of a photograph that came up on Facebook, but a lot of people come to the Fox River and the surrounding area just for the outdoor photography. And it's just amazing how much people enjoy just viewing wildlife. And, you know, back to mental health and stress relievers, we know that being outdoors is a big part of that is one thing that offers, that breathing room to be able to be outside. And where do people enjoy this? Of course, this has been studied nationally. I don't know that we have statistics for locally, but people enjoy public spaces. And of course, our county has invested in this. That's why we have all of the assets that we do. There have been lots and lots of investments over the years for our forest preserves, our trails, etc. So this is why we have the wildlife, which is awesome. I also have to say that the outdoor industry is showing that tourism investment appears in other industries across the board. And there's a lot of research on that, more that we can delve into the future. Now, why a passport? There are trail programs around the country. You can pick up maps and see, oh, I can do a farm trail and go from one farm to the next. And certainly that is one way to do it. I was intrigued by the passport because it does encourage people to go to all of the different areas that are highlighted by the community that's hosting the passport. So yes, you can have farms, and they may, and many times they will outline several different itineraries. For example, I think you have the one on the right with the mom and child. The one in the middle was created, I think that was from Georgia. That's created for the retiree that I think during COVID planned to retire and take a trip overseas, but then couldn't. So they're saying, hey, you can use your farm passport and travel throughout our state, because this was Georgia, and still have your passport stamped and have some great personal experiences and valuable experiences. To take that a step further, which I think would work for us in Kane County, because we always take ideas and then customize for what works for us. I really like the idea of another I think it was East Coast or Southeast part of the country where, and this was a multi-state area, they went further, a couple steps further to recognize their farmers markets, local farmland conservation, point those out so people could identify those when they're out and about, as well as local food access, which is a topic we heard about today. It's a huge topic for everybody across the country. There's a provision on their website for donation, financial donation. And we've been toying with this anyway, playing with this concept as we work toward a virtual website that I'll talk about in a minute, is that how to capture funding, because I think people often feel, how can I contribute? And yes, sometimes you can contribute directly to a food pantry, but there are other ways that you can contribute. So if you are a visitor from out of town and you're enjoying all of that Kane County Growing for Kane Farms have to offer, and you are compelled to contribute to a community garden or a food pantry, let's provide a place for that. Let's make the case for that. And I think that that could be made there. And there's examples of other places that are doing it. So I want to learn more about that. So again, these are things that have to take some time to develop. This is directly pretty much from KDOT's website. I think I pulled the bike trails, which we have awesome bike trails in Kane County. And then they take their map, their bike trail map, overlaid it with the forest preserves. And you can just see all the things that can be done. I mean, right now, cycling along with stops to do things. I mean, this is where it's happening in Europe, across the country. I mean, that certainly can be developed by private entrepreneurs further. My simple suggestion is why not add some local farm stops to show what the potential is for bundling packages of things to do, should someone want to do that too. Of course, all this takes a lot of work to do this. Here's some cautionary things that also came up in the research that we should be aware of. Yes, a lot of people were outside during COVID, when the peak of COVID, I should say, when we were forced indoors, and the only place or the best place to safely go were the open spaces. And people did go there, but now they're going back inside, and they're not using those places to the same level and the same intensity and frequency that they were doing before. So that's a little bit unfortunate, because we know that that's linked to good health. I know I'm not going back as much as I should, right? So forcing, pulling away from the computer, that's my goal. Pull away from the computer, get outside more. That's happening. That's like a trend that's happening, that, this type of effort could help reinvigorate that. We also have a lack of diversity. This has been a challenge in the outdoor economy and recreation industry and across the board in all of our health diversity and equity work. We know that minorities are not using the open space in the same manner and to the same frequency. And there's a lot that we can do, especially with kids, but adults too, all the way through. So how this is all positioned, because it's not just for visitors, it's for our residents as well, how we present all this, should this become a program, I think we can be mindful of that to make sure that everyone feels a part of this, and it's not just for visitors, or it's not just for a part of our population. And the same thing goes for women. And there was talk about women earlier today. Certainly women have a lot on their shoulders at different times in terms of many different hats and responsibilities, but it certainly came through here as well that women were outdoors more, but now they're back inside working again, apparently because they're not using the outdoor activities. So again, in the positioning and the messaging, I think some of that can be addressed. We also want whatever is done to coordinate with all the other work that we're doing in our local food and farms program, not only developed with our farmers, that's essential for it to work, right? It's got to work with all the other partners that are in the community, work with our farmers, work with our Farmers Market Association. Right now we have a grant from Compeer Financial that we received earlier this year to develop a virtual farmers market to help not replace what the farmers are doing, but kind of drive interest to the farmers and visibility to our farmers. And so we're working with Market Maker. Well, it's Illinois Farm Bureau that's hosting Connect Fresh through Market Maker, which is a system. It's really the best system for farmers statewide. They can still use other things other outlets that they have for their own marketing, but this one would be the all-encompassing that Kane County Farm Bureau, Growing for Kane, we would all have consistently. So that way, if someone wanted to look up Wiltse's and their strawberries, there would be one seamless way to find that on the internet, and then even buy it if this virtual farmers market were developed. So I think anything, as we work toward developing this over the winter, we certainly would want any tourism piece to be consistent, with that, so that we're making the life easier for the farmer, not more complicated, and same for the consumer. And then finally, the other work that we're always partnering with, or we're helping to support, this is other good work that's happening right now, not initiated by us, but this is an Illinois Farm Bureau pilot program. It's called the Farmers to Food Bank program, and they're testing it out, and it is also being tested right here in Kane County at Elgin. Farmers Market is one of the test sites, but what is happening, what they're recognizing is that sometimes farmers have more food grown that they're willing to sell to the food banks. Now remember, the food banks are the larger. We have Feeding America and we have Northern Illinois Food Bank are the two that cover generally this area. And then they have the food pantries that they distribute to, right? So receive massive amounts of food, and getting fresh food has been one of their big objectives over the last decade, let's say. So this effort would be farmers across the state, but the pilot here in King County, one of pilot sites, when farmers are selling to Feeding America, in this case, they can pick up that product at the farmer's market where that farmer is going to be anyway. In this case, it's going to be Elgin Farmers Market. So again, it saves time for the farmer. They're getting extra revenue, and then that fresh product will make its way to the community pantry. So all this is being tested because, of course, they're very smart. Like, we always need to run pilots to see, does this really work? But again, if this is an ongoing program and we had that tourism website, the passport website, if someone found that beneficial and they wanted to contribute, we'd want a place for them to be able to do that, right? Or go up. So in the end, when I presented this to Ag Committee, I just said, really the way we want to view this, I think, is economic driver for our farms, but also health equity. The two are intertwined. That's the work that we do. And it's for visitors, but all residents, and kind of that all-encompassing program. And then the reception from Ag Committee was really well received. And so we'll keep doing the research on that and report back starting next month, I think, in August.
Thank you, Janice. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Strathman?
Yes, Ms. Hill, do you envision this as an ongoing yearly event, or have you thought about this is a fabulous program and it sparks all kinds of wonderful, wonderful ideas.
Thank you.
Have you thought about doing something like a King County Fair event for a kickoff and then making it ongoing? Has that thought?
We haven't really talked about timing yet at all. I know that if this were to be developed, it would have to be developed during the winter months because we'd have to be able to capture the attention of the farmers, and now is not the time. We have to wait until after harvest, right? And in January. And also when they're, another point is I did test this idea with a couple farmers that they need to, and especially if we work with some consultants about projections about how much this could increase revenue, right, for them, they need to be prepared for this in terms of their ordering for this winter, right? And so part of this whole preparation, anytime we work with farmers, we have to be so aware of seasonality and preparation for what's coming up. And so that calendar there is kind of critical. But to your point regarding a fair and how much ends up being virtual versus how much ends up being on the ground and everything, I did come across some examples of around the country of fairs, not that we want to ever replace our fair, but of where local products, and including Illinois, they did this too, I think, are featured online in that kind of fair. Now, some were because they had to, because the fair was canceled during the peak of COVID, but sometimes there's a way to do the value-added products in special sales, maybe before the holidays, things like that, especially the value. So maybe those aren't necessarily the fresh items, but you're featuring your value-added products during the winter and things. This also could be and should be endless. This should go for the longest time and have many iterations as it goes. But we always start our projects small with pilots and test. And that would be the other thing that would be important: evaluation, looking at the numbers, seeing what really makes a difference for farmers, and fine tune it that way. Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Madam Chair?
So this would be a link, an app that would be developed, which would be a cost. And a consultant would be hired to develop that app. And then you would have farmers who have farm to table products or farmers markets available that they'd be on this app. So that if I want to go for my bike ride, I can go down Main Street and find that there are 5 or even 2 farmers markets or availability that I can go pick up corn, tomatoes, whatever it is I'm looking for at that particular season. Is that what we're envisioning?
Yes, and if I could even modify that a bit further, if your bike was in the shop, but you really wanted to cycle, you could go to the location where we have our bikes that are
The
our
Divvy
bike
bikes.
program, and reserve your bike maybe in advance, right? That's going to be, reserved, and then you could take that bike and then even go there. So maybe we're even combining some other programs that we offer in Kane County as well, right? And then, and then maybe you talk with your farmer and you really like that farmer that sold you that sweet corn, but you realize that they're in need of a piece of equipment and you really want to support them, and there's a donation page to help small farmers or something later. These are things that could develop over time. All I'm saying is that we would really want it to be, it could be over time, serve many purposes.
But for the purpose of the ARP committee.
Yes.
Would you be presenting, if this is something that the ARP committee is interested in, and it seems perhaps that may be the case, would you be presenting a budget to us so that we can see what developing that app would cost?
Yes. And the research that precedes that, which probably is just as important as that, because when I mentioned that there are some consultants that would be needed to help fine tune what is needed, what's the most beneficial for the industry, all the people in the industry, because I know, for example, overnight stays are really for tourism, where the money is made, right? When people are staying in the hotels. So you want to capture, in the tourism industry, the day trips are one thing, but the overnights are another. So how do you take a day trip, what was maybe originally intended as a day trip to the Fox River, and turn that into an overnight trip for those people, because that's when they spend the most amount of money. So maybe their first visit to the website, they're thinking, oh, we'll just take a day trip to Kane County and take our bikes. But then when they get on the website, they see all the cool little hotels. Oh, let's just stay. And then they're spending a lot more money here in a lot of different places and visiting the bike trail and the farmers, and then what the money that's been spent, and then the impact on the overall economy is just by how many fold, tenfold, whatever that number is. But I know that conceptually, I don't know the details, and before we develop the mechanics of that, you want to have the expert that guides us in those exact pathway to get there so that we get the best bang for our buck. So, but yes, that'll all be in a package that we prepare and submit. It sounds like in a couple of weeks, right?
Coming soon.
It's coming soon.
Seems so.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Spates.
so Ms. Hill, will you be putting this into the internal portal?
You'll see, yes,
Okay.
Mark. Yes, under Mark's direction, we'll be doing this, as well as a few other things from our department.
And I think 2 day trips equals 1 overnight trip.
Yeah.
So
There we go.
gotta catch them.
All right.
Thank you,
Okay,
Janice.
thank you.
Yeah, this is an unexpected idea, but it covers so many bases in the intention of the American Rescue Plan, economic development, health, tourism, so many boxes checked. So we'll be looking forward to that as we go along. Okay, anything else on tourism industry support? All right, next meeting, I had mentioned we'll have sort of emergency meeting either next Friday or the following Monday for the sole purpose of selecting who we're going to hire for our third-party administrator and or project manager. And then, so I'll follow up with everyone. We'll set a date, Zoom only. I'll encourage at least Zoom only. I'll be here, but just to keep it simple and easy for everyone as much as possible. Then we're at the next full meeting. We're going to want to establish some parameters for community grants and get that portal opened up. And then maybe report on some of the recoupment project ideas that are coming through the pipeline and start to develop a sense of what we may do with that portion of the total money. And then any other ideas that you guys want addressed and that I'll develop. But those are just the main things that I can tell you right now we're going to cover at the next major meeting. Does anyone have anything else that they want to include for this meeting? Questions, comments, things to follow up on?
When is the next meeting?
So it'll be either Friday the 6th or Monday
I'm
the
not
9th.
talking about the short one.
Oh, yeah. So I have to work with staff to determine when a good day for that will be. 2 weeks from now, it's our really busy week. That's the week of the county board. It would probably make sense to do it that week, but we'll just have to see if we can fit into the calendar. Otherwise, it would be the following week. So either 2 or 3 weeks from this week. But again, I will be following up with you guys too to find out what some of the best times are so we have good attendance, and encourage other board members to attend. If you're listening out there, either now or later on YouTube, please be very involved as board members as much as possible, so that just like last year with the CARES Act, all the recommendations that come from this committee get unanimously approved at the board level. Ms. Bates?
Yeah, I had a question that I asked before and it kind of got lost. Do we need a community meeting for questions and answers, so like a town hall or not?
I don't know that we need that.
Okay.
It's an idea that we can look at and see if that's something we can put together. I mean, just putting town halls together, it's not a simple feat, and it requires some work administratively.
It
and
could be a Zoom
organizing.
meeting too.
Yeah, it could be, or just a presentation. But again, we did have the committee of the whole presentation given by our Assistant State's Attorney Coyle, that people can go back to. They can pause, they can look things up, that there's the documents. And so when we open up the portals as well, we'll make all this information available to the applicants, both internally and externally, just in case they need it. Here's what we have. It'll be right there on that page, 3 different resources for understanding the uses, something like that, So we'll make sure everyone is educated. Madam Chair.
Mr. Sanchez,
I
may
thought you were going to move to adjourn for a second.
I don't have that ability. But I hope somebody takes advantage of that after I have this comment. I would hope that you develop a regular meeting schedule so that it's on the books, and that way there are not questions about when we're going to be meeting next, so that whatever is defined, everyone knows that every other week or every week, however you're going to be doing it at this time.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Martin motions, Ms. Bates seconds. All those in favor say aye. We are adjourned.